The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before Ambassador Sarah like a cathedral of light and shadow. Towering spires of living coral reached toward the domed ceiling, where bioluminescent creatures swam through thick, breathable fluid that served the aquatic delegation. The air itself hummed with dozens of different atmospheric processors, each maintaining the precise environmental conditions needed by the Council's diverse membership. Sarah walked steadily down the central pathway, her simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the other species' representatives. Behind her, the heavy doors sealed with a sound like distant thunder, cutting off her last connection to the human transport vessel waiting in orbit above. She had requested this emergency session 3 days ago. In the 72 hours since, the entire galaxy had been buzzing with speculation. Humanity, the youngest member species of the Galactic Council, had never called for an emergency session. Most species still viewed humans as barely civilized primitives who had stumbled into faster-than-light travel through sheer accident rather than scientific advancement. The Council chamber could accommodate up to 5,000 representatives from the galaxy's 847 known spacefaring civilizations. Today, nearly every seat was filled. Word had spread that the human envoy carried news of unprecedented importance, though few believed anything the primitive humans had to say could truly matter on a galactic scale. As Sarah approached the central speaking platform, she could feel hundreds of alien eyes, optical sensors, and consciousness probes focusing on her. The weight of their attention was almost physical. Some species communicated through electromagnetic fields that made her skin tingle. Others projected emotional states that pressed against her mind like gentle fingers. The platform rose from the chamber floor as she stepped onto it, lifting her to a height where all assembled beings could observe her clearly. The sensation of being elevated reminded her of ancient human amphitheaters, though this structure predated human civilization by millions of years. Chancellor of the Hegemony called the session to order. The Chancellor's species resembled massive praying mantises, though their forearms ended in delicate manipulator appendages capable of incredible precision. When spoke, his words were translated simultaneously into hundreds of languages and communication formats. The Council recognizes Ambassador of the Human Federation, announced, his translated voice carrying formal dignity despite the slight contempt that colored his bioelectric field. You have requested this emergency session under Article 7 of the Galactic Compact. State your purpose. Sarah took a slow breath, feeling the weight of what she was about to reveal. The intelligence had reached Earth only 5 days ago, transmitted by deep space monitoring stations positioned along the galaxy's outer rim. What they had discovered would change everything. Honored Council members, she began, her voice amplified and translated across the chamber. I bring urgent news that affects every civilization represented here today. Our deep space monitoring networks have detected an approaching threat, unlike anything our galaxy has faced in recorded history. A ripple of curiosity mixed with skepticism passed through the assembled representatives. The delegation, silicon-based beings who communicated through harmonic vibrations, created a low thrumming sound that their translator rendered as polite doubt. 3 days ago, Sarah continued, human monitoring stations detected massive gravitational anomalies approaching from the galactic void beyond our outer spiral arm. Initial analysis suggested a natural phenomenon, perhaps a rogue black hole or neutron star cluster. However, detailed examination has revealed something far more troubling. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the platform, showing the outer reaches of their galaxy. Slow-moving red indicators marked the positions of the detected objects. What approaches us is not a natural phenomenon, it is a fleet. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, electromagnetic bursts, and pheromone releases as hundreds of species reacted simultaneously. Chancellor called for order, his forearms weaving in complex patterns that projected calming bioelectric fields. Impossible, declared Ambassador of the Empire, her serpentine form coiling in agitation. Our own sensor networks have detected no such thing. Human technology is primitive by galactic standards. Your instruments must be malfunctioning. Sarah had expected this response. Humanity's reputation as technological novices was well established, despite their rapid advancement since joining the galactic community 50 years ago. What most species failed to understand was that human innovation often took unexpected directions. Respectfully, Ambassador, human sensor technology may be primitive by your standards, but it excels in ways your more advanced systems do not. Sarah's tone remained diplomatically neutral despite the insult. Our sensors are specifically designed to detect artificial structures operating at minimal energy output. We developed this technology due to our species' history of warfare and the need to detect stealth vessels. The holographic display shifted, showing detailed sensor readings. The data was complex, but the pattern was unmistakable to anyone familiar with artificial constructs versus natural phenomena. The approaching fleet consists of approximately 12,000 vessels of varying sizes, Sarah continued. The largest ships register as roughly 50 kilometers in length. They are maintaining strict formation and following a direct trajectory toward the galactic core. Their estimated arrival time at the outer colonies is 14 months. Senior researcher of the academic collective floated forward, his gas-filled body undulating with thought patterns. Even assuming your data is accurate, how can you be certain these vessels represent a threat? Perhaps they are explorers or refugees from beyond our galaxy. Sarah nodded respectfully to the scholar. That was our initial hope as well, researcher. However, further analysis reveals several disturbing facts. First, the fleet has made no attempt to communicate despite crossing numerous automated beacon networks designed to welcome visitors to our galaxy. Second, their approach vector will take them directly through 17 inhabited star systems before reaching the galactic core. Most significantly, we have detected energy signatures consistent with massive weapon systems powering up across the fleet. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hums and whispers of various life support systems. The implications were staggering. If Sarah's information was accurate, they faced an invasion force of unprecedented size approaching from the empty void between galaxies. Ambassador of the militant clan spoke next, his rocky, crystalline form shifting colors as emotion affected his mineral structure. Assuming this fleet exists and is hostile, what response do you propose? The outer systems you mention are primarily human colonies and a few minor species outposts. Perhaps evacuation is the most logical response. Sarah felt a flash of anger at the casual dismissal of human lives, but her expression remained carefully neutral. This was exactly the attitude she had expected from some council members. Humans were expendable in the calculations of species that had existed for millions of years. Evacuation may be possible for some systems, Sarah replied carefully, but not practical for all 17 systems in the fleet's path. These include New Shanghai, which has a population of 47 million humans, and the mining colonies, which house 12 million workers and their families. Beyond the humanitarian concerns, abandoning these systems would give the invaders forward bases within our galaxy. The representative, a tall, graceful being with 4 arms and silvery skin, spoke up immediately. The Human Federation proposes to defend our colonies. We propose that the galactic community work together to assess this threat and determine the best course of action, Sarah replied diplomatically. However, if the Council chooses not to act, the Human Federation will defend these systems to the best of our ability. Laughter erupted from several delegations. The sound, translated through dozens of interpretation systems, created a bizarre symphony of amusement, scorn, and disbelief. Ambassador practically hissed with mirth. The humans propose to fight 12,000 ships with their tiny fleet. How many vessels does humanity possess? 300, 400 primitive craft. Serpentine body coiled with amusement. Perhaps you should focus on evacuation rather than this fantasy of resistance. Sarah maintained her composure, though she felt the familiar burn of frustration that had plagued human diplomats for decades. Most galactic species viewed humans as a curiosity at best, a potential liability at worst. Their rapid expansion and aggressive colonization patterns were seen as reckless and unsustainable. The Human Federation currently maintains a fleet of approximately 800 vessels, Sarah replied calmly. However, fleet size alone does not determine combat effectiveness. Human military doctrine emphasizes mobility, adaptability, and innovative tactics. We believe these advantages could prove significant in the coming conflict. Tactics, scoffed General of the Hegemony Military Command, his form clicking with disdain. Child species always believe their innovations can overcome the mathematics of warfare. 12,000 vessels represents overwhelming force. No amount of tactical cleverness can overcome such odds. Sarah had been preparing for this moment since receiving her briefing back on Earth. What she was about to reveal would shock the Council, but it was necessary to make them understand the gravity of the situation. General raises an excellent point about the mathematics of warfare, Sarah said, her tone shifting slightly. Perhaps it would help if the Council understood exactly what kind of enemy we're facing. The holographic display changed, showing detailed analysis of the approaching fleet's composition and capabilities. The data scrolled rapidly, but the conclusions were stark and terrifying. Our deep analysis reveals that this fleet represents technology significantly more advanced than anything possessed by any known galactic civilization. Their vessels show no signs of the energy inefficiencies common to all known faster-than-light drives. Their weapons systems operate on principles we don't recognize. Most disturbing of all, the fleet shows signs of coordination that suggests either perfect artificial intelligence or some form of collective consciousness, operating on a scale never before observed. The chamber's atmosphere shifted as the implications sank in. If Sarah's analysis was correct, they weren't facing just a large invasion force. They were confronting an enemy whose technological superiority might be absolute. Chancellor leaned forward, his bioelectric field projecting intense focus. You believe this enemy could defeat the combined fleets of the galactic community? Sarah paused before answering. Her next words would either galvanize the Council into action or cause panic that might lead to the very fragmentation that would doom them all. Based on our analysis, yes. In a conventional engagement, this fleet could defeat our combined forces. However, conventional engagement is not humanity's strength. She paused, meeting the eyes or optical sensors of as many representatives as possible. What I'm about to tell you may be difficult to accept, but it's vital that you understand. Humanity has been preparing for this possibility since we first encountered galactic civilization. Confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several species began rapid consultations among their delegation members. Explain, Chancellor commanded. Sarah took another breath, knowing that her next words would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. When humans first made contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, we were amazed by the peace and cooperation we discovered. The Galactic Council represented an unprecedented achievement in collaboration. However, humanity had spent its entire evolutionary history in constant warfare. The concept of permanent peace was foreign to us. She gestured, and the display shifted to show human military development over the past 50 years. While we participated in galactic society and contributed to peaceful endeavors, we never stopped preparing for war. Every human colony was designed with defense in mind. Every trade route includes hidden supply caches and fallback positions. Every civilian vessel can be rapidly converted for military use. We have been preparing for a galactic war that we hoped would never come. The silence that followed was profound. Most galactic species had assumed that humanity's aggressive tendencies would fade as they matured and integrated with peaceful galactic society. The revelation that humans had been systematically preparing for large-scale warfare came as a shock. Ambassador was the first to speak, her voice tight with something between fear and anger. You have been secretly militarizing while pretending to embrace galactic peace. Not secretly, Sarah corrected. Human military preparations have been conducted openly, though perhaps not emphasized in diplomatic discussions. We have violated no treaties and threatened no peaceful species. We simply maintained our readiness because we understood that the galaxy's long peace might not last forever. Senior researcher floated closer to the platform. Are you saying that humanity has been expecting this invasion? Not specifically this invasion, Sarah replied. But we have been preparing for the possibility that something might threaten galactic civilization from outside our normal sphere of influence. Our strategic planners identified several potential threats: extragalactic invasion, rogue artificial intelligence, or the emergence of a hostile species with technology beyond current galactic standards. The admission sent another wave of discussion through the chamber. The idea that the youngest galactic species had been conducting strategic planning on such a scale challenged many assumptions about human capabilities and intentions. Generals' clicking grew more agitated. Even if this preparation exists, How could it possibly matter against 12,000 advanced vessels? Sarah's expression grew grim. Because, General, we haven't been preparing to fight a conventional war. We've been preparing to fight a war of survival against an overwhelming enemy. Our entire doctrine is based on making any invasion of human space so costly and difficult that it becomes unsustainable. The display shifted again, showing the network of human colonies and their defensive preparations. What the Council saw challenged their understanding of human expansion patterns. What had appeared to be random, aggressive colonization was revealed as a carefully planned strategic network. Every human colony is a fortress, Sarah explained. Every trade route is a potential ambush site. Every mining station can become a weapons factory. We have created a military infrastructure designed to turn the galaxy itself into a weapon against invaders. Chancellor's bioelectric field projected deep thoughtfulness. You propose asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale. We propose survival, Sarah replied firmly. This approaching fleet represents an extinction-level threat to galactic civilization. Conventional military responses will fail. We need to think beyond traditional fleet engagements and consider how to make their victory so costly that they eventually withdraw. Ambassador's crystalline form shifted to deep red, indicating serious consideration. Assuming your analysis is correct, what specific actions do you recommend? Sarah had been waiting for this question. The human military command had spent weeks developing comprehensive recommendations based on their analysis of the threat. First, immediate evacuation of non-essential populations from the 17 systems in the fleet's direct path. However, essential personnel must remain to maintain defensive installations and conduct delaying actions. Second, establishment of a unified command structure to coordinate resistance efforts across all threatened systems. Third, immediate sharing of all military technologies among Council species to maximize our collective defensive capabilities. The third point caused an immediate uproar. Technology sharing among galactic species was heavily regulated, with strict controls on military applications. Most advanced species jealously guarded their technological advantages. Impossible, declared Ambassador. The technology sharing protocols exist for good reason. Unrestricted military technology exchange could destabilize the entire galactic balance of power. What galactic balance? Sarah shot back, her diplomatic composure finally cracking slightly. In 14 months, there may be no galactic civilization left to worry about balance. This fleet represents an existential threat to every species in this chamber. Our choice is simple. Share our technologies and fight together, or maintain our secrets and die separately. The chamber erupted in discussions, arguments, and heated exchanges. Some species began forming impromptu coalitions, while others retreated into internal consultations. The reality of the threat was beginning to sink in, but the response was far from unified. Chancellor called for order, his bioelectric field projecting authority strong enough to override even the most agitated discussions. The Council will recess for 6 hours to allow for delegation consultations. We will reconvene to discuss specific proposals for addressing this threat. As the assembled representatives began filing out of the chamber, Sarah remained on the platform, feeling the weight of what she had just set in motion. The revelation of human military preparations would change galactic politics forever, even if they survived the coming invasion. Trust between species would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. But that was a problem for the future. Right now, she had 14 months to help organize the galaxy's defense against an enemy that could destroy everything they had built. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity, the youngest and most aggressive species in the galaxy, might be their only hope for survival. As the last representatives left the chamber, Sarah activated her communicator to contact Earth. Military command would need to know that the first phase of their plan was complete. The galaxy now knew what was coming. Whether they would choose to fight or surrender remained to be seen. But humanity would fight, they always had. The chamber fell silent, except for the ambient sounds of life support systems, maintaining environments for species that might not exist in 14 months. Sarah looked up at the bioluminescent creatures swimming in their fluid-filled space above, wondering if any of them would survive to see the galaxy on the other side of this war. The message she would send to Earth was simple. Phase 1 complete, the galaxy knows, preparing for Phase 2. Phase 2 would be much harder. Convincing the galaxy to accept the reality of the threat was just the beginning. Now they had to convince hundreds of species to abandon their traditional approaches to conflict and embrace the brutal mathematics of total war. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for 50 years. Now they would discover if their preparations were enough to save not just human civilization, but galactic civilization itself. The countdown had begun. 3 months had passed since Ambassador's revelation to the Galactic Council, and the galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What began as skepticism had evolved into grudging acceptance, then desperate preparation as independent verification confirmed the approaching threat's reality and scope. The Emergency Command Center, established on station, buzzed with activity that would have been impossible to imagine just weeks earlier. Representatives from 47 different species worked side by side, their various atmospheric requirements maintained by an intricate network of environmental controls. The station's original commercial sectors had been rapidly converted into military planning facilities, communications centers, and technological development laboratories. Admiral Sarah had been promoted from her diplomatic position to serve as deputy commander of the newly formed Galactic Defense Initiative. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that humanity, the youngest member species, now held a senior leadership position in the galaxy's first unified military command. But desperate times had a way of overturning traditional hierarchies. Standing before the massive holographic display that dominated the command center's main floor, Sarah studied the latest intelligence reports with growing concern. The approaching fleet had maintained its steady advance toward galactic space, but new details emerging from long-range reconnaissance painted an even grimmer picture than their initial assessments. "Admiral," called Commander, the military liaison whose crystalline form had shifted to the deep blue that indicated intense concentration. "We're receiving the latest probe data from the outer monitoring stations." Sarah nodded, gesturing for the data to be displayed. The holographic representation updated to show the approaching fleet in unprecedented detail. What they saw made even the most experienced military minds present pause in recognition of what they faced. The invading fleet had grown. What started as 12,000 vessels now numbered closer to 15,000, with new ships apparently being constructed during their journey. The enemy's manufacturing capabilities were beyond anything known to galactic civilization. "Analysis confirms our worst fears," reported Dr., the former ambassador who had become the GDI's chief intelligence officer. Her serpentine form coiled around her workstation as she manipulated complex data streams. "The enemy possesses self-replicating manufacturing systems. They're literally building their invasion force as they approach." General's form clicked with agitation as he studied the tactical implications. "If this construction rate continues, they'll have 20,000 vessels by the time they reach the outer colonies. Our defensive preparations become meaningless if they can simply overwhelm us with numbers." Sarah felt the familiar weight of command decisions settling on her shoulders. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of military preparation, diplomatic negotiation, and technological development. The galaxy's first unified military force was taking shape, but nothing could proceed fast enough to match the scale of the approaching threat. "What's the status on our defensive preparations?" Sarah asked, turning to the various sector commanders gathered around the central display. Commander of the Defense Corps stepped forward, his four-armed form moving with the precise efficiency that characterized his species. "The 17 systems in the fleet's direct approach have been fortified according to human asymmetric warfare protocols. We've established overlapping fields of fire, multiple fallback positions, and hidden weapons caches throughout each system. Civilian populations have been reduced to essential personnel only." "The mining colonies?" Sarah inquired. "Converted to weapons production facilities. Every major asteroid has been hollowed out and equipped with manufacturing equipment provided by the hegemony. We're producing munitions and defensive systems at maximum capacity." Secondary arms gestured to detailed production reports. "However, production rates are still insufficient for a prolonged conflict against 15,000 enemy vessels." Sarah nodded grimly. This had been the central problem plaguing their preparations. No matter how efficient their production, how clever their tactics, or how unified their response, the mathematics remained daunting. They were preparing to face an enemy that outnumbered their entire combined fleet by a factor of 10 to 1. "What about the technology sharing initiative?" Sarah asked, turning to Doctor, whose gas-filled form rippled with the complex thought patterns that indicated deep analysis. "Progress has been remarkable, considering the traditional restrictions," the researcher reported. "We've successfully integrated hegemony shield technology with human mobility systems and weapons platforms. The result is a new class of highly mobile, heavily armed vessels designed for hit-and-run tactics rather than fleet engagement." The display shifted to show the new hybrid vessels. They represented a revolution in galactic military thinking, combining the best technologies from multiple species into systems designed specifically for asymmetric warfare. "How many of these hybrid vessels can we deploy?" Sarah asked. "Current production schedules will give us approximately 800 hybrid vessels by the time the enemy fleet arrives," Doctor replied. "Additionally, we've retrofitted another 2,000 existing vessels with the new systems. However, crew training remains a significant bottleneck." This was another challenge that had emerged during the preparation period. The new hybrid vessels required crew members from multiple species working in unprecedented coordination. Training programs had been established across the galaxy, but developing effective integrated crews took time they didn't have. "Admiral," interrupted Lieutenant Torres, one of the human communications specialists, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the outer sensor network. The enemy fleet has changed course." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Any change in the enemy's behavior could dramatically alter their defensive calculations. "Display it." The holographic representation updated to show the fleet's new trajectory. Instead of maintaining their direct course toward the galactic core, the enemy vessels had shifted slightly, now heading toward a different group of star systems. "They're not targeting the human colonies anymore," observed Commander, his crystalline form shifting to orange with confusion. "Their new course takes them toward the academic systems and the research colonies." The implications hit Sarah immediately. The enemy wasn't just randomly destroying systems in their path. They were targeting specific locations for strategic reasons. "They're going after our research facilities," she realized aloud. "The systems house the galaxy's most advanced theoretical research institutions. The colonies are primarily focused on technological development." Doctor coiled around her station. "The enemy somehow knows about our technological development efforts. They're trying to prevent us from advancing our defensive capabilities." This revelation transformed their understanding of the enemy. Rather than a mindless invasion force, they were dealing with an intelligence sophisticated enough to identify and target strategic objectives. The approaching fleet wasn't just overwhelming in size, it was tactically sophisticated. "How could they have this information?" General demanded. "Our communications are secured, and the research facilities are far behind our forward defensive positions." Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. The enemy's course change suggested real-time intelligence about galactic defense preparations. Either they had managed to intercept communications, or they possessed surveillance capabilities beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. "Long-range sensors," she said suddenly. "They've been observing us the entire time. Their technology is advanced enough to monitor our activities from the galactic void. They know exactly how we're preparing to defend ourselves." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. If the enemy could observe their preparations in real time, every defensive strategy could be anticipated and countered. The element of surprise, one of humanity's key advantages, was completely lost. Commander broke the silence. "If they can observe our preparations, do they know about the hidden assets?" Sarah had been hoping someone wouldn't ask that question. The hidden assets represented humanity's most closely guarded military secret, a network of weapons platforms and manufacturing facilities established in systems that appeared to be uninhabited. These installations represented their backup plan if the main defensive lines failed. "Unknown," Sarah replied carefully. "The hidden assets were designed to be undetectable even by advanced surveillance, but we're dealing with technology beyond our understanding." Doctor's form rippled with new thought patterns. "Perhaps this course change presents an opportunity. If the enemy is targeting our research facilities, they're revealing their priorities. We can use this information to predict their future movements." Explain, Sarah requested. The enemy's decision to target research facilities suggests they view our technological development as a threat. This implies that our hybrid vessels and defensive innovations represent a genuine challenge to their plans. If we can accelerate development and deployment, we might achieve capability levels that could surprise them. General clicked skeptically. Even with accelerated development, we're still facing impossible odds. 15,000 advanced vessels cannot be defeated by 800 hybrid craft, regardless of technological advantages. Sarah had been grappling with this same problem for weeks. Every simulation, every strategic analysis, every tactical model came to the same conclusion. In a direct confrontation, galactic forces would be annihilated. But humanity's military doctrine had never relied on direct confrontation when facing superior enemies. General, you're absolutely correct about direct confrontation, Sarah said, surprising many of the assembled officers. That's why we're not going to fight them directly. She gestured, and the display shifted to show a comprehensive strategic overview of the galaxy's outer regions. Hundreds of systems, thousands of potential hiding places, and millions of possible ambush sites spread across vast distances. Human military doctrine recognizes that overwhelming enemy forces cannot be defeated through conventional engagement. Instead, such forces must be worn down through attrition, harassment, and disruption of their logistics and communications. Commander's crystal form shifted to interested purple. You propose guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. Exactly. We cannot stop 15,000 ships from entering our galaxy, but we can make every parsec of their advance costly and difficult. We can force them to commit resources to securing their supply lines, protecting their communications, and maintaining their formations. Doctor uncoiled slightly, her analytical mind engaging with the concept. Such a strategy would require unprecedented coordination across multiple star systems. The logistics alone would be staggering. Which is why we've spent the past 3 months developing the necessary infrastructure, Sarah replied. Every fortified system now includes hidden supply depots, communication relays, and fallback positions. Our hybrid vessels are designed for long-range operations with minimal logistical support. We're not preparing to fight one decisive battle. We're preparing to fight 1,000 smaller battles across the entire galaxy. General's clicking grew more thoughtful. This approach would require sacrificing the outer systems to delay and weaken the enemy advance. The statement hung heavy in the command center. Everyone present understood the implications. Hundreds of millions of beings lived in the systems that would bear the brunt of this strategy. Many would not survive the coming conflict. Sarah felt the weight of these calculations, but her expression remained steady. General, those systems are already lost in any conventional scenario. Our choice is between losing them quickly in a futile direct engagement, or losing them slowly while inflicting maximum damage on the enemy. What about the populations? Commander asked quietly. Evacuation continues for all non-essential personnel. However, many systems have chosen to maintain skeleton populations to support defensive operations. We've made it clear that these positions carry extreme risk. Sarah didn't mention that many of these skeleton populations were volunteers who understood they were unlikely to survive the coming battles. The galaxy's first unified military force was also witnessing the first instances of military sacrifice on this scale. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres called out, we're receiving reports from the advanced reconnaissance units. They've made contact with the enemy fleet. The command center's attention immediately focused on the communications station. First contact with the invasion force would provide crucial intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. Display the reports, Sarah ordered. The holographic screen filled with data from long-range reconnaissance vessels that had managed to approach the enemy fleet. What they showed contradicted several assumptions about the invaders. The enemy ships show no signs of life support systems, reported the lead reconnaissance officer. No atmosphere processors, no gravity generators, no biological waste management systems. The entire fleet appears to be operated by artificial intelligence or some form of synthetic intelligence. This revelation changed the strategic calculations significantly. An enemy that didn't require life support could operate in environments that would be impossible for biological crews. They could accelerate at rates that would kill organic beings, operate in vacuum without protective systems, and sustain damage that would incapacitate crewed vessels. "Any attempt at communication?" Sarah asked. "Multiple attempts on all known frequencies and communication protocols. The enemy fleet maintains complete radio silence. They've ignored every attempt to establish contact." Doctor's form rippled with concern. An artificial intelligence sophisticated enough to operate 15,000 vessels represents technology far beyond anything in our current understanding. How do we fight an enemy that doesn't think like biological beings? Sarah had been considering this question since the first intelligence reports suggested artificial enemy systems. Fighting other biological species required understanding their motivations, limitations, and psychological vulnerabilities. An artificial intelligence operated according to entirely different principles. "We adapt our thinking," she replied. "Artificial intelligences have their own limitations and vulnerabilities. They operate according to programmed objectives and decision trees. If we can understand their programming, we can predict their behavior and exploit their limitations." "And if their programming is beyond our understanding?" General asked. "Then we learn by fighting them," Sarah said grimly. "Combat will reveal their tactical preferences, their response patterns, and their decision-making processes. Every engagement becomes a learning opportunity." Commander's form shifted to the deep red that indicated serious concern. "Admiral, first contact with an artificial intelligence of this sophistication could be extremely dangerous. If they're able to learn from engagements as quickly as we are, they may adapt faster than we can develop countermeasures." This was the nightmare scenario that had kept Sarah awake for the past several weeks. An artificial intelligence with access to the manufacturing capabilities they had observed could potentially adapt and improve their forces in real time. Every battle could make them stronger rather than weaker. "Which is why our first engagements must be carefully planned to provide maximum intelligence while minimizing their opportunity to learn about our capabilities," Sarah replied. "We need to observe them without revealing our full tactical capabilities." The strategic discussions continued for hours as the assembled commanders worked through the implications of fighting an artificial intelligence with superior technology and overwhelming numerical superiority. Plans were revised, contingencies developed, and communication protocols established. As the meeting concluded, Sarah remained at the central display, studying the approaching fleet's position. In 11 months, they would begin arriving at the outer galactic systems. The greatest military challenge in galactic history was approaching, and they were as prepared as time and resources would allow. Lieutenant Torres approached with a priority communication. "Admiral, we're receiving a message from Earth. Military Command wants a status update for the Galactic Defense Council." Sarah nodded, knowing what questions would be asked. Earth's military leadership needed to know if their 50 years of preparation would be enough to save not just humanity, but galactic civilization itself. "Tell them Phase 2 is proceeding according to plan. We've unified galactic military forces, established manufacturing capabilities, and developed hybrid technologies beyond our original projections. We're as ready as we can be for what's coming." "And Phase 3, Torres asked quietly. Sarah glanced around the command center, where beings from dozens of species worked together in desperate preparation for an impossible war. Phase 3 was the part of the plan they hoped would never be necessary, humanity's final contingency if all other efforts failed. "Phase 3 remains classified," she replied. "Let's focus on making sure we don't need it." As Torres departed to compose the message, Sarah continued studying the enemy fleet's advance. 11 months to prepare for a war that would determine the survival of galactic civilization. The countdown continued, and everything depended on whether their preparations would be enough. The galaxy was about to discover if humanity's gift for warfare could save them all. The first enemy vessels crossed into galactic space on a Tuesday. Admiral Sarah received the confirmation while reviewing defensive positions in the outer rim systems, the moment she had been both anticipating and dreading for 14 months. "Contact confirmed in the Helix Nebula region," reported Commander Torres from the communications station aboard the flagship Defiance. "Long-range sensors show approximately 50 advance vessels breaking formation from the main fleet." Sarah studied the holographic display showing the galaxy's outer edge. The enemy's approach had been relentless and methodical, exactly as their artificial intelligence nature suggested. No deviation, no reconnaissance, no attempts at communication. They simply arrived and began their advance toward inhabited systems. "Distance to nearest populated system?" she asked. 47 hours at their current rate of advance," replied Doctor, whose serpentine form now bore the insignia of the Galactic Defense Initiative's Intelligence Division. "First contact will be at the mining colony of 442B. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. After 14 months of preparation, the war that would determine galactic civilization's survival was about to begin. Around her, the mixed crew of humans and other species worked with the efficiency born from months of intensive training. "Signal all units to implement Plan Omega-7, Sarah ordered. "All civilian vessels are to evacuate to fallback positions immediately. Military units will engage according to asymmetric protocols." The next 47 hours passed in a blur of final preparations, equipment checks, and strategic positioning. The Galactic Defense Initiative had prepared for this moment, but the reality of facing an enemy of unknown capabilities created tension throughout the fleet. The first engagement occurred exactly when predicted. The mining colony of 442B, home to 12,000 workers and their families, became humanity's first test of their new military doctrine against an overwhelming enemy. "Contact," announced the sensor operator aboard the Defiance. 50 enemy vessels have entered the system. They're maintaining formation and advancing directly toward the colony. Sarah watched the tactical display as the enemy ships appeared. They were massive, geometric constructs that showed no resemblance to any known ship design. Each vessel measured roughly 5 kilometers in length, their surfaces covered with structures that easy analysis. "Begin recording everything," she ordered. "We need to learn as much as possible about their capabilities." The first defense was provided by the system's asteroid mining platforms, which had been converted into weapons batteries during the preparation period. Hidden among the natural asteroids, these platforms waited until the enemy fleet was deep within the system before opening fire. The initial barrage was devastating. Concentrated energy beams and kinetic projectiles struck the lead enemy vessels with precision targeting that should have crippled any known ship design. Instead, the enemy vessels absorbed the damage with no apparent effect. "Their hull composition is deflecting our energy weapons," reported Doctor from the science station. "Kinetic impacts are being absorbed by some form of adaptive armor system." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Their weapons were having no effect on the enemy ships. This was the nightmare scenario that had haunted their planning sessions. "Implement Protocol 7, she ordered. "All units switch to experimental munitions." The second wave of attacks came from hidden weapons platforms using prototype ammunition developed through the technology sharing program. These weapons combined hegemony shield disruptor technology with human kinetic penetrators and energy focusing systems. This time, the results were different. The experimental weapons punched through the enemy's adaptive armor, causing visible damage to their hull structures. One enemy vessel actually lost power and began drifting. "Target confirmed destroyed," reported the weapons officer with barely contained excitement. "Experimental munitions are effective against enemy armor systems." For a moment, hope flared throughout the defensive forces. They had found a way to damage the enemy. But that hope was quickly extinguished as they observed the enemy's response. The damaged vessel was approached by 2 others. Energy beams passed between the ships, and within minutes, the damaged vessel's systems came back online. The hole in its hull began closing as some form of self-repair system activated. "They can repair each other," Sarah said, stating the obvious that everyone was thinking. "We're not just fighting individual ships, we're fighting a collective system." The battle for 442B continued for 6 hours. The defensive forces managed to damage several enemy vessels, but none were permanently disabled. Meanwhile, the enemy demonstrated weapons capabilities that analysis. Their energy beams could penetrate any known shield technology, and their targeting systems showed impossible accuracy. "Admiral," called Commander from his position at the tactical station, "the mining colony is requesting permission to evacuate." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The colony's population was trapped between the advancing enemy fleet and the defensive forces that were clearly losing the engagement. Every minute of delay meant more civilian casualties. Evacuation approved. All civilian vessels are cleared for immediate departure. The evacuation ships launched from the colony's surface as the battle raged around them. The enemy vessels ignored the fleeing civilians, focusing entirely on military targets. This provided valuable intelligence about their priorities, but little comfort for the forces being systematically destroyed. All defensive platforms are offline, reported the sensor operator. Enemy forces are advancing on the colony's surface. Sarah made the hardest decision of her military career. All units withdraw to fallback positions. We cannot hold this system. The retreat from 442B was orderly but devastating. They had lost their first engagement against the enemy, and the implications were staggering. If 50 enemy vessels could overwhelm their defenses this easily, what would happen when the main fleet of 15,000 ships arrived? As the Defiance jumped to hyperspace, Sarah watched the enemy fleet take control of the mining colony. Within hours, they had begun converting the mining equipment into some form of manufacturing system. The enemy wasn't just conquering systems, they were absorbing them into their industrial base. Battle analysis complete, Doctor reported as the ship traveled to the fallback position. Enemy vessels demonstrate superior technology in all categories. Their armor adapts to incoming weapons, their shields regenerate faster than we can damage them, and their weapons penetrate our defenses with ease. Any weaknesses identified? Sarah asked, though she suspected the answer. Their collective repair system requires proximity between vessels. If we could isolate individual ships and destroy them quickly enough, they might not be able to repair the damage. Sarah studied the tactical data from the engagement. The enemy's collective repair capability was indeed their greatest strength, but it might also be a vulnerability if exploited correctly. What about their decision-making process? She asked. Did they show any predictable behavior patterns? Doctor's form rippled with analysis. Their tactical responses were optimal in every case. No wasted movement, no redundant actions, perfect coordination between all vessels. They operate like a single organism rather than a fleet of individual ships. This confirmed Sarah's growing suspicions about the enemy's nature. They weren't fighting an artificial intelligence in the traditional sense. They were fighting something that resembled a technological organism, possibly with collective consciousness spanning thousands of vessels. Admiral, Commander Torres called from communications, we're receiving reports from across the outer rim. The enemy advance continues. They've conquered 12 systems in the past 6 hours. The scale of the invasion was beyond anything they had prepared for. 12 systems in 6 hours meant the enemy was advancing much faster than their most pessimistic projections. What's the status of our hybrid vessel program? Sarah asked. 800 hybrid vessels are ready for deployment, reported the operations officer. However, given the enemy's demonstrated capabilities, our original tactical plans may need revision. Sarah knew she needed to make fundamental changes to their strategy. The enemy's technological superiority was even greater than anticipated, and their collective repair capabilities made traditional tactics useless. Signal Admiral Martinez aboard the Resolution, she ordered. Implement contingency Plan Delta 9. We're switching to pure attrition tactics. The next phase of humanity's defense strategy abandoned any attempt to hold territory or protect specific systems. Instead, they would focus on inflicting maximum damage on the enemy while preserving their own forces for long-term resistance. Over the following weeks, the pattern of engagement evolved into something resembling guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale. Small groups of hybrid vessels would strike at enemy positions, inflict what damage they could, and retreat before the enemy could respond effectively. The key discovery came during the Battle of New Canberra, when Commander noticed that enemy vessels separated by more than 50 kilometers couldn't effectively repair each other. This led to the development of new tactics designed to isolate individual enemy ships. Wolf Pack Formation, Sarah explained to the assembled fleet commanders during a strategy briefing aboard the mobile command station. We use our superior speed and maneuverability to separate individual enemy vessels from their support groups. Multiple hybrid vessels focus fire on isolated targets while avoiding engagement with the main enemy formations. The wolf pack tactics proved more effective than direct engagement, but the cost remained high. For every enemy vessel destroyed, the Galactic Defense Initiative lost an average of 3 hybrid ships. At these rates, they could delay the enemy advance but not stop it. "We're buying time," Sarah admitted during a private conversation with her senior staff. "But we're not winning. We need something that changes the fundamental mathematics of this conflict." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Doctor had been analyzing the enemy's collective consciousness system when he made a startling discovery. "Admiral, I believe I understand how their collective system operates," he announced during an emergency briefing. "They use quantum entanglement communication between vessels to maintain collective consciousness. If we could disrupt that communication, we might be able to disable their coordination and repair capabilities." Sarah felt hope stirring for the first time in weeks. How do we disrupt quantum entanglement communication? Theoretical physics suggests that certain types of quantum interference could sever entangled connections. However, generating that interference would require technology we don't currently possess. "What would we need?" Doctor's form rippled with complex calculations. "A quantum resonance amplifier capable of generating interference patterns across multiple dimensional frequencies. The power requirements alone would be enormous." Sarah's mind immediately went to humanity's most closely guarded secret. Phase 3 of their strategic plan involved weapons systems that had been developed in absolute secrecy over the past 50 years. These systems had never been tested in combat, and their very existence was known only to the highest levels of human military command. Doctor prepared detailed specifications for the quantum resonance amplifier. Include power requirements, operational parameters, and deployment methods. "Admiral," Doctor interrupted, her serpentine form coiling with concern. "Such a weapon would require massive industrial resources to construct. Our current manufacturing capabilities are insufficient." Sarah looked around the command center at the beings from dozens of species who had worked together to defend their galaxy. What she was about to reveal would change everything about their relationship with humanity. "Prepare for classified briefing," she announced. "What I'm about to tell you is protected under the highest levels of military security. Doctor, you have authorization to access human strategic weapons archives." The revelations that followed stunned even the most experienced military minds present. For 50 years, humanity had been secretly developing weapons systems designed to fight wars on a galactic scale. Hidden manufacturing facilities throughout human space had been producing weapons platforms, resource extraction systems, and military technologies that rivaled anything possessed by the galaxy's oldest civilizations. "Project," Sarah explained, as the holographic display showed the scope of humanity's secret military preparations. 57 weapons platforms hidden throughout the galaxy, each capable of generating enough power to operate Doctor's quantum resonance amplifier. The assembled officers stared at the display in shocked silence. The weapons platforms were massive installations, some built inside asteroids, others hidden in the atmospheres of gas giants. Together, they represented a military capability that dwarfed anything in galactic civilization. "You've been preparing for galactic war for 5 decades, General said, his clicking betraying amazement rather than accusation. "We've been preparing to defend galactic civilization for 5 decades, Sarah corrected. "These weapons were never intended for conquest or aggression. They were designed to protect everything we've built together." Commander's 4 arms moved in patterns indicating deep thought. "The power requirements for 57 quantum amplifiers would be enormous. What energy source could possibly support such operations?" Sarah's expression grew grim. "Each weapons platform is equipped with controlled antimatter reaction systems. The energy output would be sufficient to power the quantum amplifiers, but activating all platforms simultaneously would essentially weaponize our entire industrial base." Doctor coiled around her station. "You're proposing to turn the galaxy itself into a weapon against the invaders." "I'm proposing to use every resource at our disposal to sever the enemy's collective consciousness and destroy their coordination capabilities. Without their collective system, they become 15,000 individual vessels rather than a single, coordinated organism." The strategic implications were staggering. If successful, the quantum amplifier network would fundamentally change the nature of the conflict. Instead of fighting a perfectly coordinated enemy with superior technology, they would be fighting thousands of individual ships operating without centralized command. Implementation timeline? Asked Commander. 72 hours to bring all platforms online and synchronize the quantum amplifier network. We'll have one chance to execute this plan. If it fails, we'll have exhausted our strategic reserves and revealed our final capabilities to the enemy. The decision to implement project was approved unanimously. For the next 72 hours, hidden facilities throughout the galaxy came online as humanity's secret military infrastructure revealed itself to their allies. The scale of the preparation impressed even the galaxy's most technologically advanced species. What had appeared to be human inefficiency and scattered colonization was revealed as the most comprehensive military network in galactic history. Quantum Amplifier Network is ready, Doctor reported as the final preparations were completed. All 57 platforms are synchronized and ready for activation. Sarah looked around the command center one final time. If their plan succeeded, they might save galactic civilization. If it failed, they would have revealed humanity's greatest secrets while accomplishing nothing. All units, this is Admiral. Execute plan. Fire when ready. Across the galaxy, 57 hidden weapons platforms activated simultaneously. The quantum resonance amplifiers generated interference patterns that rippled through dimensional space, seeking the entangled communication networks that connected the enemy fleet. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy fleet continued its methodical advance, showing no signs of disruption. Then, gradually, their perfect formation began to dissolve. It's working, breathed Doctor as sensor readings showed enemy vessels beginning to operate independently rather than as a collective unit. Their coordination is breaking down. What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. 15,000 enemy vessels, suddenly cut off from their collective consciousness, found themselves facing a unified galactic fleet that had learned their weaknesses through months of bitter combat. The battle raged for 6 days. Without their collective coordination and repair capabilities, the enemy vessels proved vulnerable to concentrated attacks. Wolf pack tactics that had previously achieved limited success now devastated enemy formations. Final enemy vessel confirmed destroyed, reported Commander Torres, her voice hoarse from 6 days of continuous operations. Sarah stared at the tactical display showing the debris fields that marked the end of the invasion. They had won, but the cost had been enormous. Nearly half the galactic fleet was gone, and entire star systems lay in ruins. Casualty reports, she asked quietly. Still compiling, Doctor replied, but preliminary estimates suggest over 2 billion beings killed across all species. 17 star systems completely destroyed, another 34 severely damaged. The numbers were staggering, but they could have been worse. Without humanity's preparation and willingness to reveal their secret capabilities, galactic civilization would have faced extinction. Admiral, called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, we're receiving congratulations from the Galactic Council. They're requesting your presence at a ceremony to commemorate the victory. Sarah nodded, though she felt little inclination to celebrate. They had saved galactic civilization, but the galaxy that emerged from this war would be fundamentally different. The old balance of power was gone, replaced by new realities shaped by warfare on an unprecedented scale. Prepare for return to Council space, she ordered. Signal all units to begin recovery operations. As the Defiance turned toward the galactic core, Sarah reflected on what they had accomplished and what it meant for the future. Humanity had revealed themselves as the galaxy's most prepared military force, but they had also proven their commitment to defending all species rather than seeking dominance. The war was over, but the peace that followed would require just as much care and planning as the conflict itself. The galaxy had learned that eternal peace was an illusion, but they had also learned that unity in the face of existential threats was possible. The greatest test of human character would come not in war, but in how they chose to use their revealed capabilities in the peace that followed. Sarah hoped that 50 years of preparation for galactic defense would be followed by centuries of responsible galactic leadership. The countdown was over. The war was won. The future remained to be written.